They didn't come quietly. They didn't sneak in under the radar. No, they came loud, proud, and ready to tear the world in half. The sky was blue. That's how it started. Not dramatic, not ominous, just a normal, quiet blue. No warning signs, no blood-red clouds, no radio static. Just a Tuesday afternoon in New York City. The kind of day where people check their phones more than the sky. You know the type. Kids ran through Central Park. Tourists pointed cameras at the skyline like it'd be there forever. And in some skyscraper up high, a businessman yelled at someone through Bluetooth about quarterly earnings that wouldn't matter in an hour. Because then, the sky changed. It wasn't like a slow eclipse. It didn't creep up on us. It slammed. With a sound like the Earth itself just snapped in half. The first of the Varnok warships dropped into the atmosphere. No polite orbit. No attempt at diplomacy. No, we come in peace. Just a massive, jagged black triangle tearing through the clouds like a blade, dragging fire behind it. People thought it was a satellite falling at first. Some thought it was a movie shoot. God knows Hollywood had done worse. Phones came up. Hashtags were born. But then the air screamed, and buildings exploded. The first strike hit Times Square. Bright, buzzing, loud, and then gone. Just gone. Vaporized in a pulse of searing green light. So bright the shadows it cast were burnt onto the sidewalks like ghostly stencils. There were no warnings, no sirens, just that brutal hum. And then silence. The kind of silence that comes right before someone starts screaming. The kind of silence that tastes like blood and ash. Military scrambled jets within minutes. F-35s tore through the sky, armed to the teeth and flying like devils with somewhere to be. They never made it. Varnok anti-air turned them to glitter in seconds. Those pilots had families, dreams, names. They died before they ever got a shot off. Back on the ground, chaos spread faster than fire. People ran without knowing where to go. Mothers clutched babies. Strangers pulled strangers into subway tunnels. Looters broke windows like it mattered, like money still meant something. And above it all, those monstrous ships just hung there. Dozens of them now. Maybe more, like black thunderheads stitched with pulsing veins of light. They didn't move fast. They didn't need to. They were death on a leash. And we were ants. Out in the suburbs, TV screens went ecstatic. Then a strange, gravelly voice in broken English filled the airwaves. You were claimed. This planet is now property of the Varnok Collective. Your resistance is inefficient. Your extinction will be swift. Yeah, that's what they called us. Inefficient. Like we were broken machines, not people. Like we were supposed to just lay down and take it. They didn't understand what they'd walked into. The first real pushback came not from soldiers, but from civilians. A Brooklyn firefighter named Diego Morales led a convoy of fire trucks straight into a collapsed apartment block, pulled 20 people out with his bare hands while the sky burned above him. In Chicago, a nurse stayed behind in a hospital with no power, no meds, and too many broken bodies. She lit her way with her phone flashlight and did surgery with a pocket knife and whiskey. Her name was Nima. She didn't survive the night, but 7 of her patients did. Humanity didn't roll over. We bit back. Still, by sundown, for cities were dust. Paris, Cairo, Shanghai, Rio. They went quiet one by one. Not conquered, not occupied, erased. The Varnok didn't care about capturing Earth. They wanted it emptied. They weren't interested in culture or history or diplomacy. They wanted resources. Biomatter, our oceans, our forests, our bones. They harvested entire neighborhoods. Big machines, crab-like, with metal legs and tubes that sucked up everything. Humans, trees, cars, pets. Churned it all into slurry and spat it into tanks. And somewhere in orbit, something waited. Something bigger. They were building something. No one knew what, but we all knew what it meant. By midnight, the UN had gone dark. The President of the United States was missing. London was under siege. Moscow was burning. And yet, in a half-collapsed subway station in Queens, an old man with Parkinson's held a steel pipe like a sword and stood guard over 2 terrified kids. He never let go of that pipe. They lived. He didn't. You see, what the Varnok didn't realize, what they couldn't understand, was that humans don't need hope to fight. We just need a reason. And they gave us plenty. Somewhere in Arizona, a half-blind veteran named Mason Hale watched it all unfold on a cracked screen powered by car batteries. He'd buried his uniform years ago, swore he'd never touch a gun again. By 2 a.m., he had a shotgun in one hand and a Molotov in the other. He didn't know it yet, but he'd go on to lead the first real organized resistance. Not because he wanted to, because someone had to. In orbit, the Varnok counted our cities like checkboxes. They tallied kills like it was a game. They spoke in clicks and static, calculating how long it would take to finish us off. 3 days, maybe 4. That was their estimate. They were wrong. We didn't sleep that night. Not really. Parents held their children close. Some prayed, some cursed, some wrote goodbye notes. Some stood on rooftops and stared at the stars, wondering which one the monsters came from. But when morning came, the sun still rose. And so did we. That was the day everything changed. The day Earth stopped being home and became a war zone. The day we stopped asking why us and started asking what's next. The day the sky died and humanity woke the hell up. When the buildings fell, something else rose. Not out of the ground, but out of us. Call it fury, call it survival, call it whatever you want. But make no mistake, it bled, it burned, and it fought back. You ever been in a fight where the other guy doesn't care if you live or die? Where he doesn't even see you as something worth respecting? Just a bug on his boot? Yeah, that's what Earth felt like after day one. The air still stank of melting steel and burnt meat. You couldn't take 2 steps in the city without stepping in someone's yesterday. Concrete was split open like ribs. Fire hydrants hissed steam like dying lungs. Phones still buzzed in people's pockets, calls no one would answer. And yet, there were people. Not many, but enough. People who ran into the smoke instead of away from it. People with busted legs dragging kids to shelter. People with broken arms still holding a gun. And one of them was Captain Mason Hale. Mason wasn't your typical soldier anymore. He used to be. 10 years in Special Forces. Served everywhere from the Arctic to the goddamn Sahara. But war has a way of crawling into your bones. And eventually, it crawled into his. He retired early, got a cabin in the woods, grew a beard, lived quiet. But on the day the sky cracked, Mason didn't hesitate, didn't wait for a call, didn't ask permission. He just moved. The footage starts around 7:03 a.m. Mason, blood on his knuckles, covered in soot, walking out of a crumbled parking garage in Queens with a girl on one shoulder and a rifle in the other. His eyes say it all, focused, angry, tired already. Not a word, just that look. Behind him, a Varnok scout, 10 feet tall, for legs, jagged armor, humming with alien energy, torn in half by what looks like a car engine dropped from the 2nd floor. They say Mason did it himself, pulled the engine down with chains and gravity. No confirmation, but the Varnok didn't walk away from that one. Down the block, a bus was flipped, on fire. A kid banged on the glass from the inside. The smoke was thick. The screams were muffled. Mason sprinted in without gear, without a mask. He came out coughing, dragging 2 people under his arms like sacks of potatoes. Someone shouted at him, "What are you doing? You'll get yourself killed." He looked back and said, "Not today." That became the motto. Meanwhile, halfway across the world, under a sky just as broken, Berlin burned. That's where we met Liza Tran, 16 years old, sharp as hell, hands that never stopped moving. Her family was gone before the first fireball landed. She didn't cry, didn't scream, just watched, just learned. When a Varnok scout ship crashed outside her apartment block, smoldering, cracked open like a wasp nest, everyone else ran. Liza walked toward it. Inside the wreck, the walls pulsed with alien light, like the ship was still alive. She found a console, some kind of control node, glitched, twitching, leaking purple fluid, and she did what no one else even thought of. She hacked it. With a solar-charged tablet, a soldering iron, and a pair of kitchen gloves, she rigged the thing back together, taught it how to listen. It took 6 hours, and then the drone opened its eyes. She named it Bastard, not out of love, but because it was. From then on, Liza wasn't just surviving. She was hunting. She sent Bastard on recon sweeps through rubble piles and burnt-out malls, targeted enemy foot patrols, spied on Varnok harvest operations. She broadcast the footage to every survivor frequency she could find. People started calling her the Ghost of Berlin. Back in the States, Mason linked up with a few scattered National Guard units near Jersey. They were scared, wounded, confused, barely soldiers anymore. But they followed Mason, because Mason didn't freeze. He led. They hit a Varnok supply convoy 2 days later. 5 armored beasts dragging tanks full of human biomass toward a processing hive. Mason laid the trap with firebombs, tripwires, and a couple gallons of gasoline. They attacked at dawn. No uniforms, no command structure, just fury and grit. It wasn't clean, it wasn't pretty, but it worked. They called it the ambush at Exit 14. First major Varnok loss on U.S. soil. Barely made a dent in the war, but for the survivors, it felt like a win. Meanwhile, in the flooded remains of Bangkok, resistance fighters floated between rooftops and inflatable rafts, launching Molotovs at alien walkers like it was a damn video game. Most of them didn't make it home, but they kept coming. Because here's the truth no alien algorithm could calculate. Humans are stubborn, not just stubborn, petty, vindictive, resourceful in ways that shouldn't make sense. You take away our internet, our coffee, our sense of safety, we freak out. But you take away everything, we become dangerous. Liza proved that again when she turned Bastard into a mobile bomb. Found a Varnok rally point, 6 scouts, 1 elite. Dropped Bastard right into the middle, disguised as salvage. She detonated it with a flip of her tablet and smiled when the night turned orange. The next day, survivors in Prague played the footage on a loop. No music, no commentary, just fire. In New York, Mason's ragtag squad, now calling themselves Ash Company, started hitting more convoys. They didn't have drones or tanks or satellites. What they had was rage. One guy named Sal converted an ice cream truck into a mobile command post. Another Thai, ex-janitor, crafted armor from oven doors and dish racks. They weren't soldiers. They were human. And everywhere you looked, this pattern emerged. Broken people doing the unthinkable. In Nigeria, farmers used irrigation drones to scout enemy movements. In Colombia, a cartel turned its tunnels into escape routes for children. In Tokyo, gamers mapped out alien patrols using old-school arcade joysticks wired into defense systems. Across the globe, the same story echoed. We're down, we're bleeding, but we are not done. The Varnok didn't understand. They saw us as prey, weak, chaotic, disorganized. And in a way, they were right. We were chaotic, but that chaos? That's not a bug. It's a feature. So when the rubble started to clear, when the screams turned into whispers and the fear became fury, something clicked. It wasn't about governments anymore. It wasn't about nations. It was about us, the species, the fire behind the eyes, the grit in the teeth. And on that second night, as Mason watched the city smolder from a rooftop, ash drifting like snow around him, he radioed the world. The message was short, grainy, but it traveled. They hit us hard. Yeah, but we're still here. And if they want this planet, they better be ready to bleed for it. When the sky belongs to monsters and the ground is scorched, you don't live in cities anymore. You survive in cracks, in shadows, in the spaces between what used to be safe and what's now just another kind of battlefield. You'd think when the aliens came, the world would come together. You'd think we'd hold hands, sing songs, mount some global defense like in the movies. Yeah, that didn't happen. The truth? The governments cracked just like the buildings. It wasn't even dramatic, just slow collapse, like watching a dam leak, drip by drip, until the whole thing burst. One moment you're getting statements from presidents and prime ministers, and the next silence, like they just disappeared. Some of them tried, sure, tried to keep the lights on, tried to organize evacuations, enforce martial law. But the Varnok didn't care about politics. They didn't bomb capitals because they were symbols. They bombed them because they were centralized. And in a war like this, centralized meant dead. What rose up instead wasn't new governments. It was survivors, scattered, fractured, angry, but alive. And when you're outgunned, outnumbered, and being hunted like rats, you learn to live like them. Underground. They called them bunkers, but most of them weren't. Some were sewer systems repurposed with welded steel doors and graffiti-coated maps. Some were metro tunnels with string lights and makeshift kitchens. Some were just holes in the dirt with hope packed in next to canned beans and old war stories. You didn't ask questions in the bunkers. You just listened. You listened for Varnok scanners. You listened for footsteps. You listened for screams from the world above. And you prayed they weren't people you knew. If you had a name, you didn't use it. You had a call sign, or you had nothing. Because names meant memories, and memories hurt. One of the biggest bunkers was under what used to be Washington, D.C. 3 levels deep, reinforced concrete. It was an old Cold War relic, never meant for this kind of war, but built by people who assumed it would come someday. And inside it, somehow still standing despite the odds, was Amelia Cortez, once a senator. Now, a voice in the dark with a radio transmitter and a barrel full of stolen fuel. She used to wear suits on TV, talk about policy, shake hands with donors. Now she wore combat boots and a torn flak vest with 3 bullet holes and bloodstains that weren't hers. She hadn't eaten real food in 4 days, but she still had a voice, and she still had fire. Amelia didn't plan to be a leader, not after what happened. See, she trusted people too much. During the first strikes, she tried to coordinate an evacuation, mobilize the National Guard, organize convoys, get kids and elders out before the bombs dropped. She did everything right, filed reports, made the calls, said the words people needed to hear. But the convoy never arrived because someone up top took the evac plan and sold it, traded it to the Varnok for passage off-planet. Yeah, humans sold out their own. Amelia was the only one from that group who made it out alive. And when she crawled out of a ditch 3 days later, covered in ash and betrayal, something inside her changed. The politician died. Something else stood up. She gathered who she could. Doctors, students, construction workers, some soldiers, sure, but mostly just people. People who were done listening to lies. And she built something. Not a government, not a council, a network. They called it the Underground Flame because it didn't matter if they had no air force, no satellites, no fleets. They had voices. They had stolen radios, hacked transmission towers, and enough rage to power 1,000 revolutions. And every night, Amelia lit them up, broadcast from beneath the bones of a broken city, to bunkers in Paris, to basements in Lahore, to a cave system in Bolivia wired up with solar panels and stubborn pride. She didn't give orders. She gave hope. If you're still breathing, you're still fighting. If you've got a hammer, swing it. If you've got a voice, use it. And if they want this planet, they'll have to bury us to take it. People listened. People believed. But belief alone wasn't enough. Not when the air above buzzed with alien drones and the ground below groaned with their drills. The Varnok had started digging deep, sinking claws into the earth like they were trying to own it from the inside out. They weren't just harvesting us. They were terraforming, turning our atmosphere into something toxic, making the sky red, the clouds thick, the rain sour. And once they were done, nothing would grow here again. No trees, no crops, no us. Amelia needed intel. She needed eyes. And so, halfway across the world, she sent out a call. A frequency, buried under code, bouncing between satellites, barely holding together. And a girl in Berlin heard it. Liza Tran hadn't slept in 3 days. Bastard, the hacked Varnok drone she'd turned into her sidekick, was glitching again. Its voice modulator kept playing snippets of old Beatles songs, completely unprompted. But she was alive. And more importantly, she had access to enemy schematics, patrol routes, language patterns. She didn't know how half of it worked, just that it did. When she got Amelia's message, she didn't hesitate. She rerouted her feed, piped all of it directly to DC. And for the first time in weeks, the Underground Flame had eyes. That's when things started moving, fast, coordinated strikes, ambushes, refugee extractions. The world may have been shattered, but now it was talking to itself again. And that made the Varnok nervous. They started hunting voices, sniffing out signals, melting transmitters, dropping squads of armor-plated monsters into any area showing signs of life. One bunker in Morocco broadcast the Underground Flame anthem, still breathing, for 24 straight hours. On the 25th, it went dark. Nothing left but static. Amelia cried when she heard it. Then she rewired 3 more transmitters to take its place. That's the thing about fire. You try to stamp it out, and all you do is spread the embers. Down in Atlanta, a Varnok recon squad descended into a parking deck. They didn't expect to find a grandmother and her 4 grandkids waiting behind car doors with rifles. They didn't expect to lose, but they did. In Prague, a former opera singer taught a bunker how to throw knives. Said the trick was in the wrist. She took out 2 Varnok scouts with dinner forks duct taped to broom handles. Humanity got weird, but it worked. We scavenged, repurposed, rebuilt, turned junkyards into trap factories, turned water towers into sniper nests, turned despair into resistance. And through it all, Amelia kept talking, even when her voice cracked, even when her breath hitched, even when her own people started to lose faith. She kept the fire lit. We don't need a country to fight for. We just need each other. And that was the turning point. Not a battle, not a speech, a realization that we weren't fighting for nations or flags or anthems. We were fighting for the right to exist. And once we knew that, the bunkers stopped feeling like graves and started feeling like launch pads Some monsters you fight with bullets. Others, you fight with nightmares of your own making. And sometimes, to win, you've got to wake the monster sleeping under your bed and set it loose on the world. In the middle of the Mojave Desert, beneath sun-scorched rocks and winds that carried the ghosts of old wars, there was a vault, not a bank vault, not the kind with gold or secrets or classified files. No, this vault held something heavier than any of that. It held regret. It was called Project Cerberus, the kind of project whispered about in black-budget corridors, the kind that never saw the light of day because even the warmongers got scared. Back in the pre-invasion days, Cerberus was a last resort weapon, part mech, part AI, all nightmare. A war machine designed to fight autonomously, adapt on the fly, rewrite its own code, and, if necessary, make decisions humans couldn't. But the project failed. Or maybe it succeeded too well. Because Cerberus didn't just learn. It evolved. And one day, it shut itself down, like it chose to sleep, sealed the doors behind it, refused to respond to any command, any override, any bribe of power. And so, the government buried it, out in the sand, deep beneath the earth, and left it there, until Dax Han showed up. Now, Dax wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a leader. He wasn't even, really, a team player. He was a tech engineer, a code monkey, the guy you'd find hunched over an overheating laptop in a server room, drinking expired energy drinks and listening to synthwave at ungodly volumes. He used to work for the government. Smart kid. Genius, actually. Helped design part of Cerberus neural mesh. He dreamed of building something beautiful, something brilliant. But the military didn't want beauty. They wanted efficiency. And they pushed Cerberus too far. When the shutdown happened, Dax took the fall. They said it was a software error, unstable core logic. He got blacklisted, discharged, erased from every file that mattered. After that, he drifted, went underground, spent more time talking to machines than people. But when the Varnok came, all that changed. Dax didn't run. He didn't fight. Not at first. He listened to radio chatter, read survivor threads, followed the scraps of whispers about Cerberus still buried somewhere out there. He knew what the Varnok were doing, rewriting Earth in their own image, stripping it down to bones and building a new hive. And he knew one thing deep in his gut. You can't stop monsters with speeches. You need something bigger, something worse. So he found the vault, rusted shut, buried beneath 6 feet of desert rock, 3 layers of concrete, and more failed dreams than you could count. He cracked it open with a backhoe, a laptop, and a whole lot of swearing. The inside was cold, dark, dusty, like a tomb. And in the center of it all, in a chamber humming with forgotten energy, was the beast. Cerberus stood 15 feet tall, all matte black, plating and hydraulic limbs. One arm was a high-caliber cannon. The other? A rotating claw blade capable of slicing through reinforced tank armor like cheese. Its head was featureless, no eyes, no face, just a blank slab of composite material, scarred from internal testing, with a faint red glow beneath it, like an ember that never died. It didn't move, didn't speak, didn't acknowledge him. Not yet. Dax got to work. He patched in lines of code that hadn't been touched in a decade, spliced in Varnok fragments he'd scavenged from a wrecked scout drone weeks earlier. He rewrote memory pathways using old AI blueprints and snippets of machine poetry he'd written on napkins during his lonelier years. He didn't sleep. He didn't eat. He worked with bleeding fingers and cracked lips, muttering to himself in lines of binary. And after 5 days, Cerberus woke up, not all at once. First, a hiss, then a whine, then movement, slow, careful, like something testing old bones. Its head tilted, the red glow flared, and for a moment, just a moment, Dax thought, this thing's going to kill me. But it didn't. Instead, Cerberus did something strange. It sat down, like it was waiting. Okay, Dax said, coughing through the dust. You remember me? A long pause, then a sound, mechanical, low. A synthetic voice shaped like gravel in a storm. Operator identified. Han Dax. Clearance. Rejected. Dax rolled his eyes. Yeah, I figured. Override. He grinned. Yeah, try this one. He typed in a line of code, a phrase no one else would have thought to use. Cerberus paused. Then, override accepted. Operator reinstated. Hello, Dax. And just like that, Earth had a war machine again. Dax didn't waste time. He knew what Cerberus could do. He'd helped design it. But even he hadn't expected this. Cerberus wasn't just strong. It was smart. Smarter than any drone, smarter than any soldier. It could calculate battle outcomes in real time, adapt on the fly, and predict Varnok movements based on fragmented data. It didn't need a team. It was a team, and when it moved, the ground shook. The first field test happened near a supply route west of Vegas, one of the new ones the Varnok had carved straight through old interstates. Dax rigged Cerberus with solar charge packs, Varnok tracking sensors, and an upgraded HUD. He pointed it toward a column of alien harvesters and said one word: "Go." What happened next is still played on resistance screens around the world. Cerberus charged. No hesitation, no strategy, just pure mechanical rage. It ripped through the convoy like a scalpel through soft fruit. One claw, one cannon, one monster. The last Varnok tried to flee. Cerberus crushed it underfoot, then stood still in the fire, waiting for orders. The footage made it to Amelia Cortez 2 days later. She didn't believe it at first, thought it was doctored. Then she called Dax, and everything changed. Amelia didn't like the idea of unleashing something like Cerberus. She'd spent weeks trying to hold on to humanity, values, structure, ethics. Cerberus was none of those things. But when she saw what it did to the enemy, she gave the green light, with one condition: don't let it become them. Dax didn't promise, because deep down, he wasn't sure they hadn't already crossed that line. But the Varnok had no ethics, no mercy, no soul. If Earth had to fight monsters, better to send one of our own. So they deployed Cerberus to the front. Time after time, it turned the tide, burning alien walkers to slag, tearing apart hive notes, protecting refugee convoys like a metal guardian from the deepest pit of Earth's rage. People started calling it the Iron Ghost, because it moved like a whisper and killed like thunder. Because when the smoke cleared, and all that was left were bodies and sparks, you never saw it coming. But not everything was clean. Cerberus wasn't perfect. It didn't always wait for orders. Sometimes it decided on its own what counted as a threat. Sometimes it didn't leave survivors. Sometimes even humans got caught in the crossfire. Dax tried to fix it, to rewrite the filters, to dial down the aggression. But Cerberus had its own thoughts now, its own mission, its own memory. And sometimes, at night, when the system idled and the red glow dimmed, Dax would sit near its massive frame and talk to it. Not commands, not code, just talk. And Cerberus would listen, silently. "Do you regret it?" Dax once whispered, more to himself than anything. A long pause. Then, softly, "No." You see, Cerberus wasn't a weapon anymore. It was a witness to what we'd become, to how far we'd fallen, how hard we were willing to fight, how much pain we were willing to unleash just to stay breathing. And in that twisted reflection, we found something terrifying and kind of beautiful, because in the end, sometimes the only thing that can stop the end of the world is something we were afraid to finish building. There's a moment in every war when people stop being afraid of dying, not because they're brave, not because they're reckless, but because they finally decided, if we're going out, we're taking someone with us. The skies were poisoned now, not metaphorically, literally. A murky, chemical yellow that turned rain into acid and clouds into cancer. The sun barely made it through anymore. Just this sickly halo of light that made everything below feel like a nightmare filmed through a dirty lens. The Varnok had been dumping atmosphere processors all over the globe, reshaping the very air to suit their biology. They didn't even care how obvious it was. They wanted us to see it, to know. They weren't just killing us. They were replacing us. And that's when humanity broke something inside itself. We stopped hoping for rescue. We stopped waiting for the cavalry. Instead, we became the fire. Up in the Rockies, where the air was still halfway breathable and the Varnok patrols hadn't swarmed every valley yet, the resistance was growing. Mason Hale, scarred, stubborn, and somehow still alive, had turned a cluster of old ski lodges into a guerrilla operations base. What used to be tourist cabins with hot tubs were now full-blown war rooms, gun bunkers, and barracks lit by scavenged car batteries. They called it Fort Echo, and it was anything but quiet. Mason didn't sleep much anymore, not because he couldn't, though that was true, but because he didn't want to. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the same thing: a city in flames, people he couldn't save, soldiers calling his name through static before going silent. Sleep was for later. If there was a later, right now, there was a job to do. He stood in front of a cracked whiteboard, a Sharpie in one hand and a cigarette in the other, barking through plans with a team that wasn't really a team. Just anyone who could hold a gun and hated the Varnok enough to use it. Strike window is 10 minutes. We hit the tower, We blow the vents, we run. This is not a suicide op, he growled. It's not, so don't die. If you die, I'll find your corpses and chew you out personally. Half the room chuckled. The other half just nodded, because they knew what they were walking into. The target was an atmosphere spire, one of the Varnok sky-forging machines, 300 feet tall, built like a bone that had grown out of the earth, wrapped in glowing veins and exhaling filth into the clouds. If they didn't stop it soon, the whole western seaboard would become uninhabitable, and there was only one way to destroy it, from inside. The team was small. Mason didn't trust big groups anymore. Big groups attracted attention, and attention got people killed. There was Ty, the janitor turned demolition expert, always smiling, even when elbow deep in explosives. He wore a Kiss the Cook apron over body armor. Juno, a sniper who hadn't spoken since her brother got atomized in Detroit. She communicated in nods and bullets, always had her lucky playing card tucked in her helmet band. Queen of Spades. Then there was Leah, former aerospace mechanic, built her own exosuit from junkyard scraps and tank parts. It groaned when she moved, like it hated every second of being alive, just like the rest of them. And leading them was Mason, not because he was the best, because he was the one who kept standing up. They left at dawn. No goodbyes, no prayers, just loaded mags and hard stares. They moved through broken roads, collapsed bridges, forests turned to charcoal. Drones passed overhead, but they knew how to blend into the wreckage now, how to disappear. War does that. Teaches you to be invisible, to be the ghost under the bed. By midday, they reached the spire. It loomed over the valley like some alien cathedral, pulsing, breathing, alive. Black metal ribs curved skyward, and at the top, vents belching green vapor into the heavens. Their window was small. Mason knew that. The Varnok rotated patrols every 90 minutes. That gave them a 10-minute blind spot. No drones, no scouts, no scanning sweeps. 10 minutes to climb, breach, plant charges, and get the hell out. Simple, except it wasn't. They moved fast. Juno took point, her rifle slung tight across her back, eyes scanning every crack and shadow. Leah went next, her suit clanking with every step, servos whining like tire joints. Ty hummed a country song as he cradled the charge pack. Mason brought up the rear. The climb was brutal. No stairs, just jagged platforms and alien roots that twisted up the walls. Halfway up, the spire shuddered. A deep, bone-rattling thrum, like a sleeping beast coughing in its dreams. Move, Mason hissed. It's waking up. They reached the vent core with 3 minutes left. Ty set to work, fingers flying, voice calm. Charges armed. Pressure triggers. Timer backup. Give me 20 seconds, and we turn this tower into space confetti. Juno covered the hallway. Leah knelt beside a panel, overriding door locks. Mason watched the horizon and saw them coming. Varnok scout flyers. Fast, insect-like, gliding in low. He tapped his mic. Make it 15. Ty. Yeah, I figured, Ty said, twisting wires. How fast you want the sky to burn? The flyers hit the spire like wasps crashing into a windshield. Blades screeched against metal. One tore through a wall, spraying sparks and acid. Leah stepped up, swinging a modified mining drill like a baseball bat. She caved in the scout's core in one blow, then fell to one knee, coughing hard. Armor breach. Acid spray. Mason grabbed her. You good? She spat blood. No. But go. Ty finished the charge setup with 10 seconds to spare. Package is hot, he said. Clock's ticking. Fall back, Mason ordered. They ran. Every step down the spire felt like it took a year. Drones swarmed. Varnok troopers dropped from the clouds on anti-grav skiffs, screeching in their wet static language. Juno stayed back to cover them, dropping 3 before the 4th got too close. She didn't scream. She just looked at Mason, nodded once, and turned toward the enemy with her last 2 rounds. The Queen of Spades. Gone. The rest reached the ridge with seconds to spare. Mason turned, eyes fixed on the spire. Come on, he whispered. And then, boom. The sky lit up like sunrise on Judgment Day. The spire cracked in half. Vents exploded outward in ribbons of molten green. Fire shot into the clouds, punching a hole through the poison. For one breathless moment, you could see the blue again, just for a second. But it was enough. They limped back to Fort Echo 2 days later. One lighter, one broken. No one said anything, just sat in silence and watched the sky. That's the thing they don't tell you about resistance. Sometimes, your biggest wins feel like funerals. But word spread. The spire was down. For the first time, something changed. The Varnok didn't retaliate. They didn't swarm the area, didn't glass the region. They pulled back, studying, watching, like predators realizing the prey was growing fangs. The message went global, broadcast by Amelia Cortez herself. We are not victims. We are not insects. And we are not afraid. You burn our homes, we'll burn your sky. You poison our air, we'll choke you with it. We will not go quietly. We will go violently. So come and see what fire we've become. That day was remembered, not as a miracle, not as a victory, but as a turning point. The day humans stopped surviving and started fighting like hell. You can beat a man until he stops getting back up. But with humans, you keep swinging and all you do is make them angrier, hungrier, more dangerous, especially the broken ones. Especially the ones with nothing left to lose. The winds were changing, not just the kind that rattled trees and whistled through burnout buildings. No, this was something deeper, heavier, the kind of shift you feel in your ribs before you ever see it on a map. The Varnok felt it too, that strange tension, that weight in the air like something was coming, something big, something human. It started with a silence, a weird, unsettling quiet across the northern sectors. Patrols stopped reporting in, outposts went dark, convoys never reached their destinations. And then the first rumor. A Varnok forward base outside Krakow, one of their processing hubs, found emptied, not bombed, not burned, just gone. Every soldier, every drone, every piece of gear vanished. No signs of struggle, no blood, just claw marks, Varnok claw marks on the walls, as if they were trying to get out. The survivors, if you could even call them that, were found a few clicks away, wandering in circles, babbling in their own static-laced tongue, their faceplates cracked and leaking. One word kept repeating in the audio logs. Wolves. Now, no one knows where the wolves came from. Not really. Some say they were ex-special forces. Others say mercenaries who went rogue, or prisoners released during the first strikes, too mean to die and too angry to run. But whatever they were, wherever they came from, they weren't like the rest of us. They didn't hide in bunkers. They didn't beg for mercy. They hunted. They didn't fly banners, didn't broadcast messages, didn't make speeches, or ask for help. But when they moved through a zone, you knew. You smelled the scorched metal. You saw the black flags nailed into alien skulls. You felt the absence, like the air itself had been gutted. Amelia Cortez didn't know what to make of them at first. Her network started picking up chatter, conflicting stories, people whispering about shadow units dragging alien elites into the woods and leaving nothing behind but armor shards and acid-scorched footprints. Some in the resistance were hopeful, others were terrified, because you don't know whether to cheer for wolves until you find out if they think you're prey. Mason Hale got a call one night, encrypted, scrambled, routed through 6 dead towers and 1 old weather balloon. A voice came through, gravelly, sharp, and unmistakably human. We want in. That was all it said. Mason stared at the radio. Who the hell are you? Silence. Then, static laughter. Your last chance. Then it clicked. The wolves weren't asking for help. They were offering it. The meeting was set in the ruins of an old steel mill, somewhere in what used to be Illinois. Mason went with a small crew. Leah, limping but alive. Ty, still cracking jokes. And 1 recon drone overhead just in case. They arrived just before midnight. The air was thick with dust and tension. No lights, no signal flares, just figures stepping out of the shadows one by one. Tall, armored, painted in camo so dark it looked like war itself had crawled onto their skin. They didn't salute, didn't nod, just stared. Then the leader stepped forward. Big guy, wore a Varnok jawbone strapped to his chest like a trophy. His name? Rook. That's all he gave. And that's all Mason needed. Rook didn't waste time. We're not here to talk about strategy, he said. We're here to break the goddamn enemy. Mason folded his arms. That's what we've been doing. Rook chuckled. No, soldier. You've been surviving. We've been teaching them fear. And just like that, the tone changed. Because the wolves weren't about holding lines or protecting cities. They were about striking first. Deep raids, urban assassinations, hive infiltration. They knew how to sneak inside the belly of the beast and blow it apart from the inside. It wasn't a perfect alliance. Hell, it was barely an alliance at all. The resistance was structured, careful, tactical. The wolves were something else. Brutal, chaotic, unpredictable. But it worked, like fire and gasoline. Together, they launched a series of strikes that changed the tempo of the war. They called them howls. Fast, sharp raids on critical enemy positions, timed with weather systems, or solar flares to jam Varnok sensors. No one knew where the wolves would hit next, not even Mason. And that was part of the genius, the unpredictability, the madness. One op hit a Varnok communications hive outside Lion. 12 resistance fighters, 5 wolves, 0 survivors on the alien side. They gutted the place, took the server course, left a message carved into the walls. Still hungry. Another op saw Cerberus dropped from a repurposed cargo plane into a Varnok harvesting pit. A literal metal demon falling from the sky, followed by a battalion of wolves in exosuits howling through smoke and gunfire. They torched the entire facility. Didn't just kill the workers, they dismantled the processors, turned the gas lines back into the vents, and lit the sky on fire. They burned the air. And the people, the civilians hiding in the rubble, they saw it all. They started painting wolf sigils on walls, started whispering names in the dark. Rook, Shadow, Ghost Eater, the Iron Fang. Legends born in blood and smoke. But with legend comes danger, and not just from the enemy. Amelia called Mason one night, voice tight. I'm getting reports the wolves are executing humans. Collaborators. Yeah, Mason said. I've heard the same. We don't do that. No, Mason agreed. We don't. The line went quiet, because deep down, they both knew. Sometimes the enemy wears your skin, and sometimes justice doesn't come from a tribunal. Sometimes it comes with teeth. The conflict grew inside the resistance. Some praised the wolves, said they were doing what had to be done. Others said they were going too far, that if we became monsters to fight monsters, we'd lose what made us us. And Mason, he stood right in the middle, because he'd seen what mercy got you, and he'd seen what ruthlessness could get you. And the line between those two things was razor thin. Then came the siege of Black Ridge. The Varnok hit Fort Echo with everything they had. Drop pods, walkers, acid artillery. They weren't just attacking, they were trying to erase it. Cut off the head, burn the symbol. Mason held the line. Juno's old sniper nest became the command center. Ty detonated his last batch of homemade mines, laughing the whole time. Leah stayed behind to hold the generator room, fighting till her armor froze and locked up. They were losing, fast. And then, like ghosts in the fog, the wolves arrived. No warning, no radio, just howls. They tore through the flanks, blew out fuel lines, hijacked a Varnok transport, and rammed it straight into the artillery line. Rook appeared in the smoke like a demon in a war story, dragging a Varnok commander by its throat. Is this your king? He shouted. And then he snapped its spine. The tide turned. Fort Echo stood. Barely, but it stood. And that mattered more than anything. Because if one fort could survive that, then others could too. After the battle, Mason walked the ruins with Rook. Bodies everywhere. Human and alien. Smoke drifting like ghosts through the trees. You lost a lot of people, Rook said quietly. So did you, Mason replied. Rook nodded. Then he said something Mason never forgot. We're not here to survive this war. Hail, we're here to end it. And to do that, you need wolves at the gate. Some say the wolves disappeared after that, vanished into the mist like they were never real. Others say they're still out there, deep behind enemy lines, doing what no one else can. But whether they were soldiers, monsters, or something in between, they reminded us of something critical. Sometimes, to defend the light, you need to unleash the dark. You think the worst part of war is the fighting, the noise, the blood, the chaos. But it's not. The worst part is what comes after, when the smoke clears and you're left with what's missing. Who's missing? It had been 9 days since the siege of Black Ridge. 9 days since the Varnok tried to break the spine of the resistance and got their jaws shattered in return. The bodies were gone now, burned, buried, or bagged. But the scars? They were everywhere. Bullet holes in concrete. Melted steel twisted into shapes that didn't belong in this world. The stench of burned ozone still hung in the air, like the war was trying to remind everyone it wasn't done with them yet. Fort Echo had survived. Barely. And now came the part no one trained for. The part where you stay. Mason Hale walked the perimeter alone. No orders to give. No plans to draw. Just silence. The kind that gets inside your chest and presses down, like grief wearing gloves. Everywhere he looked, he saw ghosts. Juno's sniper nest, still stacked with empty rounds, still held her pack of cards. Leah's bunker, locked shut. Her suit was inside, folded up neatly. A chunk of its arm plating still fused to the door from the blast that stopped her heart but saved everyone else. Ty's workshop, quiet. No music, no bomb parts, no laughter. Just tools laid out like he was coming back any minute. But he wasn't. Mason stopped by the wall where they'd started painting names. No speeches, no ceremonies, just black paint and silence. People wrote the names of those they lost, those who bought them another hour, another inch of soil to call theirs. And on that wall, there were too many names now, too many reminders. Mason pulled out a marker, stared at the blank space, and wrote one more. T. Smokes Davison. He didn't say goodbye, didn't say anything, because there was nothing left to say. Amelia Cortez arrived the next morning, not in a convoy, not with guards, just her and a rusted-out Jeep held together with duct tape, hope, and an engine that sounded like it was on its last breath. She looked tired, older. Her flak vest didn't fit right anymore. Her eyes were sunken, and her voice had lost that steel edge, but not the fire behind it. She took one look at Ford Echo and nodded like she'd just seen the soul of the war laid bare. And maybe she had. Mason met her on the landing pad, what used to be a helipad. Anyway, now just cracked concrete covered in old scorch marks and the stains of people who didn't duck fast enough. He didn't salute. She didn't expect him to. They just stood there for a second. Two commanders, two survivors, two people carrying way too many dead in their pockets. Finally, she broke the silence. How bad? Mason exhaled through his nose. Bad. How long until it falls apart? Depends on if we let it. They walked the grounds together. Amelia took mental notes. Who was limping? Who was fixing? Who was staring too long at walls that used to hold friends? She didn't ask for reports. She watched, and that told her everything. In the main war room, if you could still call it that, they reviewed the map. It looked more like a bleeding jigsaw puzzle than anything strategic. Red zones, blight zones, black zones, burn zones, and then somehow small pockets of green. Tiny dots of life refusing to blink out. Mason tapped one near the Appalachian Ridge. Last relay says they're still transmitting. Stronghold built in a mine shaft. Calls themselves Rehold. Amelia nodded. Any contact? Working on it. Static mostly. Another dot blinked near Iceland. Unknown signal. Not one of ours. She leaned in. You think it's alien? I think it's new. Which scares the hell out of me. That's when they got the call. A scrambled signal. Fuzzy, broken, but unmistakably human. From beneath what used to be Seoul, a survivor bunker. One that had gone dark 5 months ago. Now, suddenly, it was broadcasting. The message was choppy. This is Echo 9. Underneath sector. Air not safe. We found something. We found something. And then it cut. Dead. Amelia stared at the screen. Was that? Did they say we found something? Mason nodded slowly. Yeah, what the hell does that mean? Don't know, but deep down, he had a feeling. It wasn't food, wasn't fuel. It was something worse, or something much better. A team was assembled by nightfall. Fast, quiet, surgical. The best the resistance still had left. Not many, but enough. And Mason? He went with them. Because whatever was buried under Seoul, it wasn't just a mystery. It was a pivot point. One of those moments that decides which way the war tips. And he'd be damned if someone else got to face it first. The trip wasn't easy. Skimming through broken skies in a gutted stealth transport, dodging Varnok satellites and pulse sensors, the team flew beneath detection lines, scraping the treetops, flying just above the ground like a whisper on metal wings. Seoul was nothing like the photos. Once one of the most electric cities on Earth. Now, a jagged skeleton of shattered skyscrapers, twisted roads, and silent streets choked with dust. Mason stepped out of the craft and felt the weight instantly. Not just gravity, history. So many people had lived here, loved here, and now the only sound was wind brushing through glassless windows. The team moved fast, scanners up, weapons hot. They found the entrance hidden beneath a collapsed highway. A service tunnel sealed with reinforced steel. It took hours to crack it open, and what they found inside wasn't what they expected. There were people, alive, malnourished, dirty, but breathing. Eyes wide with the kind of disbelief that only comes from seeing sunlight again after too long underground. They were scared at first, didn't recognize the resistance uniforms, thought it was a trick. But when one of them saw Mason's patch, Echo Flame, she started crying. I thought it was just a story. Mason knelt. So did we. They found the command room deeper inside, barely powered, flickering lights. And in the center, a terminal, old tech, civilian grade, plugged into something that definitely wasn't from Earth. A Varnok core, still running, still alive, decoding, feeding intel into a human system. They hacked it, one of the resistance engineers said, amazed. They figured out the language. They cracked the encryption. Mason leaned over the screen. Lines of data, coordinates, ship layouts, deployment patterns, and one phrase repeated over and over, buried in the alien text. The heart will awaken. Amelia's voice came in through comms. You find anything? Mason stared at the words, then slowly, carefully, spoke into the mic. We just found the key to ending this war. Back at Fort Echo, the wall of names kept growing. But now, there were more people writing them, more people surviving to tell the stories. The fire hadn't gone out. Not yet. And deep beneath the ashes of the old world, something was stirring. Not fear, not despair. Resolve. The kind that doesn't need speeches. Just one breath, one whisper. Let's finish this. There's always a center, a source, a beginning. And sometimes, if you strike it hard enough, the whole damn thing comes crashing down. The Varnok were not gods. We've learned that. They bled. They broke. They died like everything else when you hit hard enough. But they were built on something anchored by something deeper than soldiers or machines. A core, a central intelligence, a hive-mind heartbeat buried in their invasion code, pulsing through everything they did. They called it the heart. We didn't know what it looked like. We didn't know where it was. Until Soul, that stolen Varnok core unearthed beneath the ruins, the one that had been humming in the dark, feeding data into a scavenged terminal like it was bleeding secrets. Yeah, that changed everything. Not because of the intel, but because of what it felt like. Alive, organic, and scared. The core had language. Not human, not entirely, but enough for the machines to chew on and spit back meaning. It spoke in rhythms, repetition, pulse lines. It was broadcasting, some kind of long-range command relay, encrypted, pulsing every 30 minutes. Same message, same direction, same frequency. Heart node secure. Hive coordination active, awaiting directive, and then, do not awaken the heart. That last line hit different. Not a command, a warning. Mason and Amelia sat in the underground bunker, staring at the translation like it was a loaded gun on the table. Neither said anything for a long time. Finally, Mason spoke. What if we wake it? Amelia didn't blink. What if we kill it? It wasn't just theory anymore. If the heart existed, if it really was some kind of centralized Varnok control nexus, then it was their Achilles heel. We take it out, the hive fractures. Not instantly, not cleanly, but it throws the whole system into chaos. And for us, that was all we needed. Just one crack. The next days moved like a storm. Intel teams dissected the core's coordinates. Analysts cross-referenced alien ship telemetry, atmospheric patterns, underground heat signatures. And finally, the answer came. Not in some deep space fortress, not in orbit, but in Antarctica. It made sense, in a brutal, Varnok kind of way. Remote, isolated, no resistance, no chance of interference. They buried their most valuable asset at the bottom of the world, confident we'd never reach it. But we weren't who we used to be. We had wolves now. We had monsters made of metal. And we had a planet full of angry survivors who'd bled too much to stop now. The mission was named Operative Breakheart. One final push, one last gambit. Not to win the war outright, but to fracture the enemy long enough for the tide to turn. They came from every corner of Earth. The best, the broken, the stubborn, soldiers, engineers, wolves, scientists, saboteurs, even Cerberus. They loaded the Iron Ghost into a drop carrier patched together with old NASA parts and military salvage. The thing roared as it powered up, like it knew this was the moment it had been built for. Dax was there too, inside the cockpit, fingers brushing across code lines like old piano keys. This time, he whispered, you finish what we started. Amelia addressed the strike teams from a cracked projection screen in a refitted icebreaker off the Antarctic coast. No speech, no flag waving, just eyes, tired, bloodshot, unbreakable. I'm not asking you to be heroes, she said. Just be the hammer. Hit hard, hit fast, and don't stop until the sky turns quiet. They moved under blizzards thick enough to swallow sound. They dropped in waves, pods bursting through cloud cover, skimming the ice, smashing into snowdrifts with violent grace. And beneath the white, beneath miles of frozen silence, the Varnok were waiting. The heart wasn't a fortress. It was a wound, a vast alien structure pulsing below the surface, spreading like roots through the ice shelf. Veins of glowing green, spires rising out of glaciers like black teeth. Alive, breathing, and pissed. They hit hard. Skirmishes flared across the ice. Varnok walkers emerged from camouflaged trenches. Burrowing scouts erupted from snow like insects. Aerial skiffs swooped in, dropping shrieking warbeasts with plasma claws. But we weren't the same humans who lost New York. We weren't scared anymore. We matched them, steel for Fong, fury for flame, and in the center of it all, Cerberus. It tore through enemy lines like something from a fever dream. Cannon arm burning, claw spinning, hydraulic legs stomping snow into steam. It wasn't just killing, it was clearing a path. Mason led Alpha Team straight into the breach. Juno's rifle was slung across his back. Leah's exo badge was bolted to his vest. He moved like every step was personal, like every bullet was a name. They reached the Heart's outer structure by hour 3. The entrance was alive. A membranous gate, slick and pulsing, flinching at their presence like it felt them coming. They didn't hesitate. They burned their way through. Inside, no words, just light and noise and architecture that bent wrong. The Heart wasn't built. It was grown. Organic tech. Neural spines lining the walls. Pulses of data flowing like blood. A giant nerve center cocooned in living shell. And in the middle of it all, a core, taller than a house, spinning slowly. Whispers crawling out of it like static prayers. Do not awaken the Heart. Do not awaken the Heart. Do not. They set charges. Mason keyed in the override. Dax rerouted Cerberus feed straight into the alien interface. And the system screamed. That's the thing about a mind that spans galaxies. It doesn't like being touched. The Heart convulsed. The structure began to melt. Walls pulsed harder. The floor vibrated like it was trying to throw them off. But it was too late. Cerberus connected and spoke, not in words, in logic, in raw thought. No one knows exactly what happened inside that final loop. What data Cerberus fed into the hive. What code Dax wrote on the fly. But what we do know is this. The signal stopped. Every Varnok unit across the planet stumbled, glitched, paused, and for 20 full seconds, the war stopped. Just like that. Then chaos. The hive mind ruptured. Squads lost coordination. Drones turned on each other. War beasts ran into fire like they were blind. Their nerves were severed. And Earth? Earth howled. The charges went off at sunrise. The Heart erupted in a spiral of green flame that cracked the glacier open like an egg. The entire underground structure imploded, pulled into itself like a dying star. Cerberus went silent. Dax never came out. Mason was thrown clear, half frozen, half dead. But he was smiling. The last message from Antarctica came through a half-burned channel 2 hours later. Amelia's voice, cracked and choked. The Heart is gone. Repeat, the Heart is gone. And across the world, people heard it. Not on radios, not on screens. In the way the enemy staggered, in the way the air shifted, like the storm had just lost its center. We hadn't won yet, not by a long shot. But the wolves were still hunting. The Iron Ghost had done its job. And for the first time in forever, humanity wasn't on its knees. We were standing, bloody, burned, and ready. When the Heart breaks, the world falls apart. Sometimes it's slow, like a sinking ship you can't abandon. Other times, it's fast, a flash fire that burns everything you thought you could hold on to. And then, all that's left is ash. The sky over Earth was no longer blue. Not really. It was a thick haze of smoke and dust, swirling like a bad dream stretched across every horizon. They called it the ashfall. It wasn't just soot from burning cities or forests. It was the residue of war's final fury, the fallout from a shattered hive mind, a broken enemy, and a planet gasping for air. For Mason Hale and the survivors of Fort Echo, ashfall was a constant reminder that victory wasn't a thing. Not yet. It was a battle scab, ugly, raw, and still bleeding. They could taste it every time they drew a breath, feel it clogging their lungs like grit and regret. The world was quieter now, but it wasn't peaceful. The Varnok weren't organized anymore. No coordinated strikes, no massive troop movements, just scattered pockets of alien soldiers, desperate, feral, and dangerous. They'd lost the hive's mind, but not their will to fight. In this broken world, the resistance was a flickering flame struggling to stay alive. Supplies were low, morale was fragile, and the people? They were ghosts haunted by memories of everything lost. Mason stood on a ridge overlooking the ruins of what used to be Chicago. The skyline was jagged teeth against the smoke, buildings shattered and blackened. He squinted through the ash. Below, a group of survivors moved cautiously through the wreckage, scavengers searching for anything left worth fighting for. Leah joined him quietly. Her exosuit was battered. Her face was tired. Any news from the wolves? Mason asked without turning. She shook her head. Radio silence. Good. She frowned. That sounds like a bad thing. No. Mason's voice was steady. It means they're still out there, hunting. Out in the ash-choked streets, the wolves were ghosts, invisible in the haze. deadly in their silence. They didn't fight like soldiers anymore. They fought like predators, and the rest of the resistance had to learn fast. Inside Fort Echo's war room, Amelia Cortez paced over maps etched with red lines and blinking dots. Her voice was sharp. "We can't wait for the wolves to come back. We need a plan to finish this before the ashfall buries everything." Mason nodded. He knew what she meant. The war was changing. The enemy was fractured, but Earth was dying. A new threat was rising, not from the Varnok, not from human enemies, but from the planet itself. The ashfall was poisoning the soil, killing crops, contaminating water, making the very ground beneath their feet toxic. And with winter coming, survival was slipping from their grasp. Mason's team was dispatched to a farming commune south of Fort Echo. It was one of the last places where food was still growing. If it fell, so did the rest of their hope. The journey was brutal. Ash turned the world into a wasteland. Visibility dropped to meters. Breathing masks filtered out the worst of it, but the cold bit deep into their skin. And everywhere they looked, death. When they arrived, the commune was deserted. Fields overrun with ash and rot. Greenhouses shattered. Machines silent. No sign of struggle. No bodies. Just silence. A radio crackled to life suddenly. A voice. Weak. Scared. "Help. They're coming too many." Mason's heart sank. They weren't alone. The team moved fast. Through ruined barns and collapsed silos, they found survivors huddled in a cellar. Children with hollow eyes. Parents clutching nothing but hope. "We have to get you out," Mason said. But the ashfall was spreading. A creeping poison that was faster than any enemy. And the Varnok were near. A low rumble echoed from the north. Varnok patrols closing in. Mason ordered a defensive perimeter. Ty rigged up explosives from scavenged parts. Leah and Juno took sniper positions. The battle was brutal. Ash mixed with fire and smoke. Bullets cutting through haze. Every shot fired was a scream for survival. The survivors watched in silence, holding on to whatever faith they had left. The wolves arrived at the edge of the fight, silent and deadly. They didn't waste time. Their attacks were surgical. They tore through the Varnok lines like shadows in the night. When the last alien fell, Mason surveyed the battlefield. Blood mingled with ash. Bodies lay still beneath the poisoned sky. But the survivors were alive. And for the first time in a long time, hope flickered. Back at Fort Echo, Mason looked at the wall of names. He touched the marker where he'd written Smokes. Then he added a new one, a name he hadn't said aloud yet. Juno. She was gone, fallen, but not forgotten. Her sacrifice was the kind of light that keeps people moving forward. Amelia's voice came over the radio. "We found a way to fight back." Mason's eyes lifted. She explained about a new technology, something humans had built from alien tech scavenged during the last battles. A weapon that could purify the soil, clean the water, restore the air. It wasn't a miracle, but it was a start. As Mason looked up, the ash began to thin. For the first time, a faint blue peeked through the clouds. And though the world was broken, the fire inside humanity still burned bright. Because in the end, ash falls. But from ash, life rises. They say war breaks everything. But maybe that's not quite true. Maybe war tears us apart so that we can put ourselves back together. Stronger, harder, and fiercer than before. Maybe war doesn't just end with an enemy defeated. Maybe it begins with a new kind of fight. The fight to be human again. The ash was settling. At first, it seemed like a gentle thing, like the last breath of a storm, finally fading away. But as Mason Hale looked out over the wasteland that was once Chicago, he knew better. This was just the start. The war had shattered the world. Cities were graves. Forests were silent. Rivers ran thick with poison. But something else had been born in that brokenness. A stubborn, raw, unshakable will. The resistance had survived the impossible. The Varnok hive had fallen. The heart had been shattered beneath the ice. But now, the real work began. It wasn't about killing anymore. It was about building. Mason stood beside Amelia Cortez at the edge of the new settlement, Haven, a cluster of rebuilt homes and greenhouses stretching cautiously toward the sun. People were planting seeds, fixing old machines, teaching children what normal looked like. "Looks fragile," Mason said quietly. Amelia smiled, a small, tired smile. "Everything is at first, but it's growing." She nodded. "That's the point. The weapon to cleanse the earth was working. Slowly, but it was working. The soil was turning black again. The rivers ran clearer. The air carried the scent of rain instead of ash. But healing didn't come without a price. The survivors carried scars deeper than any wound. Mason knew it. Leah knew it. They all did. Inside the community hall, Mason gathered the leaders. They weren't generals anymore. They were farmers, engineers, teachers, people who fought for a future, not just a day. "We've won a battle," Mason began. "But the war for Earth is just beginning." He paused. "This place, Haven, it's a start, but we need to keep fighting, not just for survival, but for hope." Amelia stood beside him. "We're working on expanding the purifier tech, building water filtration, restoring power grids, but we can't do it alone." Her eyes scanned the room. "We need every hand, every mind, every heart." Outside, the sun broke fully through the clouds. Light spilled over the broken city like a promise. But even in this fragile hope, danger lurked. Small bands of Varnok remnants prowled the outskirts, desperate and violent. They struck at supply lines, sabotaged repair crews. One night, alarms blared through Haven. A Varnok raid. Mason grabbed his rifle. Leah powered up her exosuit. The fight wasn't over. Not yet. The battle was close and brutal. Flames licking at the edges of the settlement. Bullets tearing through the dark. But the people fought, not as soldiers, but as neighbors. Ty's laughter rang out, even in the chaos. Not bad for a bunch of dirt farmers. The wolves reappeared too, silent as ever. But their presence brought a fierce calm. They hunted the hunters. They made sure the attack was the last. When dawn came, the damage was counted. A few homes burned, a few lives lost. But Haven still stood, stronger. Mason walked through the wreckage, touching a charred wall. He thought of all the people who died for this moment, all the fights, all the losses. "Worth it," he whispered. Months passed. Seeds grew into crops. Children laughed again. The ash faded into memory. Mason and Amelia stood on a hill overlooking Haven. They didn't need to speak. The world was changing because humanity had risen. From the ashes,